Hello and welcome, I'm the Anti-Philosopher. Today I want to respond to True Dill Tom's video on Monarchism and Democracy, published August 20th, 2017. I'll begin by saying I just stumbled across his channel not too long ago, and I have only watched a handful of his videos. From what I can tell, he is right-wing, and the video I am going to comment on today makes me think he is alt-right. As I say, I have not gone through his entire playlist. He has not even said he's alt-right in all the videos, in any of the videos that I have watched. But the argument in this video is what makes me think he's alt-right. He begins the video by explaining how the general consensus worldwide is we used to have monarchy, we used to have kings and queens, and now we have democracy. And democracy is a step forward. It is progress. It is better than monarchy. Yeah, it's obvious that that is the consensus. I mean, I don't have to, pull up statistics. We all know. I mean, that's, it's basically the water we swim in, which is what he says. Although he doesn't use that language. Aha. That is where we are wrong, says True Dill Tom. I'm probably horribly butchering his name, so I apologize to him and to you. His basic argument in the video is we've got it all wrong. Monarchy was actually better. His argument is actually more economic than it is political. He touches on the political a few times throughout the video, but his main problem, or the main issue he sees with democracy, and the main reason he thinks monarchy is better, has to do with economics. He touches on something called time preference. Now, Wikipedia says, in economics, the time preference is the current relative variation placed on receiving a good at an earlier date compared with receiving it at a later date. He argues that the monarch's time preference is lower, meaning he is more concerned about the future. That is what it means. If your time preference is lower, it means you're more concerned about the future. If your time preference is higher, it means you're more concerned about the here and now. And he's contrasting a monarch from a democratic politician. As I said, he thinks a monarch has a low time preference because his property, his wealth, is dependent on the state. His wealth is the state, basically. And therefore, he is more concerned with what can be done to preserve the state in the long term. A Democratic politician, on the other hand, doesn't own the state, or his position, his wealth, particularly, I should say, is not dependent on the state. It's not the same as the state. Therefore, the Democratic politician is not as concerned about the long-term well-being of the state. He is more concerned with the here and now, particularly his wealth. And so he will do what he can to boost himself up right now, because being a Democratic politician, he might not be in power forever. He most certainly will not be. And therefore, he has the incentive to do all he can right now to better himself, and to hell with the rest of it. Now, he also brings up other aspects to the economy. He says that interest rates were lower under monarchs. He says that sorry, I'm going over my notes. He says that prices were lower under a monarch on average, and purchasing power was greater under a monarch on average. And now, touching on the political, he says that divorce was less likely under a monarch. Single parenting and singledom were less likely under a monarch. Abortion was less likely under a monarch, and there was a greater separation between a soldier and a citizen. In other words, the whole society was not preparing for war. It was seen as one king's army against another king's army, and he even goes so far as to say that wars were. He quotes somebody who says that wars were, quote, more humane, and basically that the kings followed, a certain amount of gentlemanly conduct, and as well, and the soldiers did as well. In times of warfare, and that civilian casualties were kept to a minimum, and it was thought far worse to kill civilians, because it was basically a private affair between one monarch and another. Now, I would have to do a lot more research. I can't say if interest rates were lower under monarchs. I cannot say that prices were lower under monarchs. Although given, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to comment where I'm deficient, and my knowledge of, say, the economy, the global economy, or more like Europe's economy in the Middle Ages, is slim to none. But I am quite perturbed, excuse me, by his argument that monarchy is far better than democracy. Now, he goes so far as to say that, if you question democracy, that if you question the idea that democracy is better than former forms of government, that you're committing a heresy. Heresy or not, I just think he's incorrect. And whether it's the consensus or not. Now, it does happen to be the consensus. Does that make it wrong? No. And see, I say that, he's part of the alt-right, or I think he is, because I just don't, I can't think of a, mainstream conservative in the United States, for example. Now, I think he lives in the UK, but I live in the United States, so I'm more familiar with the US. I can't think of a mainstream conservative in the United States who is pro-monarchy. You list them off, or you list any of these well-known conservatives: Tucker Carlson, Bill O'Reilly, Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Sarah Palin. I'm not saying those are necessarily mainstream, but I'd, just list any number of well-known conservatives. I don't think they'd say, "Oh, we need democracy." In fact, many of them are the ones who romanticize the American Revolution. And so that's why I think, he must be, that's why I think he must be on the alt-right, because I just don't understand why anybody who isn't on the alt-right would make an argument like this. This is basically a reactionary argument. You might not use that language. Again, I haven't looked at his entire output, but he is basically saying, no, things were better several centuries, or at least a century or two ago, when the political and economic power was in the hands of a few. And I just don't understand that argument. He talks about how democracy, he literally says democracy is a regression, and he calls it A and B ganging up on C. And he brings up the national debt that many countries have nowadays, and he says it's never lower than 30%, and it sometimes surpasses 100% of the national 100% of the national output, and it's never lower than 30% of the national output. And then he says, if we continue on this path of democracy, it's going to lead to socialism, and that socialism is going to lead basically to the end of civilization. That's not, caricaturing his position much, if at all. And I just don't understand the individuals that, seem to want to go backwards. I agree. From the video, I take it he thinks, we're kind of hanging by a precipice. In a sense, I agree. We are in. I'm reminded of the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. We are in interesting times, and we have a lot of issues that we have to figure out if we want to preserve what is good about our society. But I don't think that is going way back to the time of monarchy. I mean, you can poke holes in pretty much any system of government. Why? Because we are imperfect beings. And you know, you can also make an argument for probably about every form of government under the right circumstances. You know, if you have Plato's philosopher king, oh, the monarchy is great. If you have a well-informed citizenry, democracy is great. If you are really are governed by the best, oligarchy is great. But as we all know, the world is not perfect. And quite often monarchs are not philosopher kings. Quite often we do not have a well-educated citizenry. And quite often we are not ruled by the best under oligarchy. So I really think we need to try to look forward rather than backward. I think myself, we probably need to come up with a new understanding of politics in general. I think our current way of viewing it is somewhat one-dimensional. Yeah, I mean, his whole argument really leaves me speechless. Not because he's committing heresy, but just because, you know, I don't understand how you can come to that argument. I mean, I can understand how he comes to that argument. He comes to the argument because he thinks democracy is degenerative. And as I say, pretty much any system can be degenerative. But what makes democracy progressive is it allows for the individual to one extent or another be given the chance to thrive. And you know, maybe he's I don't know how he feels on the collectivism individualism debate. But that's why democracy is above monarchy, is because monarchy, not to say that everybody under monarchy is living through hell, or that, you know, every single aspect of every single kingship or queenship was evil. Once again, the world doesn't work that way. But it only allowed a certain amount of people to thrive. Most people were stuck, farming a lord's land, stuck as serfs on a lord's or earl's or duke's or the king's land. Well, it's all the king's land. The king owns everything. It allows fewer people to, as I say, at least be given the opportunity to thrive. You know, I'm not looking for a utopia here. I'm not looking, everybody can, be as rich as Oprah. That's, it's not going to happen. I know that's not going to happen. But I would rather live in a democracy than a monarchy, because in a democracy, everybody's welfare as a whole, on average, goes up. I mean, if you look throughout history, more and more people have been enfranchised. More and more people have gotten a say in the political process. Of course, back, all the way back to the ancient Greeks, Athens had the first quasi-democracy. Now, it was very limited democracy, but it was far more radical and far more inclusive than anything that had come before it. The Roman Republic, once again, had its problems. By far not as inclusive as what we come to expect from a republic, but still inclusive, or more inclusive than, to an extent, the kingship that came before it. The Magna Carta, the English Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. You could say that those revolutions in the short term caused a lot of destruction, particularly the French Revolution. But the ideas lived on to change the world. And allowed for the internet, for new forms of art. If we lived under a monarchy, how would true Dill Tom know that he, would have the freedoms that he so cherishes? And I'm sure he does. I feel like there was some other things I wanted to say, but my video's already pushing it. So I guess I'll wrap it up. Again, I just think we need to look forward, not backward. We need to try to come up with new solutions, not try to apply old solutions to current problems. I'm the anti-philosopher, and remember that everything is interesting.